Oh, good evening. It just occurred to me I've got a fire running. Hang on a second. Oh. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know if you could hear it or not, but in the room that was really, really loud. There was this clattery, banging sort of noise coming from probably the oldest blow heater that you've ever heard. Anyway, bless the Lord. Well, here we are, the other side of Christmas, and I'm hoping that no matter what your circumstances, no matter what your expectations that you had, at least in amongst all of this strange, different kind of year, something of peace and something of comfort. And even if your remembering included sorrow or loss, that in the remembering there was also a sense of gratitude for the good times, the things that you can remember. What I've found really interesting this year is because we've not been caught up in quite such a chaotic state. We've not been involved quite so much in the process of celebrating Christmas, is that it's given me more chance probably than ever, certainly in all the years I can remember, to really think about the things that we declare almost as just a part of the tradition. There's something quite dangerous, well, not dangerous, but difficult or quite, I suppose, robbing us of meaning that happens when we take something which is powerful and true and it just becomes familiar. And so lots of the readings that we read around Christmas, they have become familiar. That they've become things which are just a part of our psyche. And I have one of those weird memories that text quite often, if I've heard it a few times, certainly it becomes just, I can just go through it without really thinking about it. It's just a set of words and cadences and sounds. And if I've heard somebody who's particularly eloquent read something a few times, then I can reproduce it the way that they would read it. But that doesn't mean that I've engaged with the meaning. As I was thinking about what to say tonight, this is the last Sunday night live stream of 2020. And when we started doing these back at the beginning of lockdown in March, I never imagined that we'd still be here. I didn't think that my Sunday nights would continue like this right through the year. And I wasn't hoping for it, and I wasn't expecting it, but here I am. And as I was preparing, and I was thinking, well, how do I view what's coming next? A verse that I have heard probably every Christmas of my life. Verse that gets read out year in, year out, year in, year out. A declaration of who our God is, a declaration of peace and a period of rest for his people. Suddenly took on a new meaning to me. So tonight, if you bear with me, we're going to do something a lot closer to, I suppose, a normal Bible study, in that I want to take one statement out of Isaiah 40. It's the second half of Isaiah 40, verse 23. And I want to share with you what it means to me right now. To give it some context, I have to admit that I'm quite a political creature. I very much engage with what's going on in the world around me in a political sense, and I form opinions, and I draw conclusions, and I quite often act on them. I quite often take a position, and I'm not condemning that. I know sometimes the way I do it may not be the wisest, but I think it's good that we should engage with the world, and certainly as Christians, we have a responsibility to speak about issues of mercy and compassion and the value of every human being, that we should not shirk by saying, well, that's politics, that's the world, I'm not getting involved. Some of the greatest heroes of the faith were people that found themselves in a position where they could speak truth to power. Whether Daniel or his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whether Joseph in the court of Pharaoh, or Paul, who has special access and the ability to get all the way to the ruler of his age because of his Roman heritage, but who also has an ability to speak amongst God's people Israel because of his heritage as an Israelite, as a Jew of Jews, as a Pharisee of Pharisees, as he puts it. And so I don't want us to shirk that responsibility, but nevertheless, sometimes I guess in my own approach, when I see what's happening around me, I feel the need to make decisions about its worth, its value, its impact, about how I should engage with it. Decisions which I guess you could call judgments. In Isaiah 40, verse 23, we read this, speaking of Jesus the Messiah. He brings princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Now, I know, because Isaiah 40 gets read nearly every Christmas in some context or another. I know I've heard that read thousands of times. But as I was sat thinking this week about the reality of next year, about the Brexit process, about what's going on with vaccinations, about the decisions for tiers of lockdown and tier 4 and its impact on livelihoods and lives and all of those different things, and feeling like I needed to arrive in some way at my own opinion, it suddenly occurred to me that when Isaiah writes this, he's not just writing about people that hold the title judge in a legal sense. In fact, the language used is much more general than that. He makes those who pass judgment, those who have opinions, those who assess things. He makes the judges of the earth useless. And so facing 2021, there are three things that it just blesses me that I am liberated from either the fear of or indeed the love of judgment. All human beings don't wish to be judged, but take great delight in judging others, judging their fashion sense, judging their life choices, judging the decisions that they make, or the people that they vote for, or the way in which they live their lives, judging their environmental impact or their educational choices, judging their prowess in something that they love to do. I often find that just the most awful thing, when somebody takes great delight in some activity that to them is a great pleasure, and everybody around them wishes to just throw shade on it because, well, not everybody is Picasso. Not everybody is Yehudi Menuhin. Not everybody is a rock star. Not everybody is a great poet. But why not do it because you love it? Anyway, so here are the three things in which I'm really delighted that in 2021, I'm released from both the fear and the love of judgment. The first one is this: Jesus makes any judgment of my path irrelevant. Jesus makes any judgment of my path irrelevant. That's not that my path could not be judged. The Bible's quite clear. It says there is a way that seems right to someone, but the end of it is death. So the Bible doesn't pull its punches about the likelihood of my decisions having great outcomes. But Jesus makes any judgment of my path irrelevant because I'm forgiven. I'm forgiven. For the things that I do in ignorance, I'm forgiven. For the things that I do willfully, I'm forgiven. For the things that I do out of fear or anger or hubris or whatever it is, in Christ, I'm forgiven. Jesus didn't wait for me to appeal to his forgiveness before he decreed that I was forgiven. Rather, at the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. You know, as you go into 2021, it may well be that you're facing judgment. You're facing the consequences of choices that you've made. It might simply be that the people around you disagree with the path that you're taking, whether it's in the relation to the COVID restrictions or career choices or relationships or whatever it might be. All the time, you're making decisions and choices. And I pray that your decisions and choices are positive, that they're taken in relationship to God. But you know what? Judgment of your path is irrelevant, because in Christ there is forgiveness. Now, to take advantage of that forgiveness, you have to ask for it. You have to receive it in yourself. You have to acknowledge that it's necessary. But bless God that you don't have to acknowledge that it's necessary and then somehow accomplish any transformation on your own. The forgiveness of Jesus is not, Father, forgive them, when they figure out what it is they've done and they come up with a plan to remedy it. No, it's Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. The fear of judgment because of the path that you've been on, or because of choices that you make in the future, is removed, because the judges of this earth, the identity that the systems and the people around you would give you because of their opinion of your choices, has no power. He makes the judges of the earth useless. And in the judgment of God, even your worst decisions have been covered by what Jesus did for you in his death and resurrection. The second thing that got me excited as I was thinking about this is that Jesus makes any assessment of my prospects meaningless. I can still remember very, very many years ago, when I was still quite young, not even quite in my teenage years, a teacher who told me in no uncertain terms that she thought I would be in jail by the time I was 16. I don't know whether she was trying to shock me into submission, or she was genuinely concerned. I will leave that one with the Lord. I couldn't possibly guess, but I do remember her saying it. Jesus makes any assessment of my prospects meaningless, because my future does not have to be defined by either my ability or by my history. Some of you know I used to work in the finance sector, and one of the great statements, the great coverall statements that is often made, is that past performance is no guarantee of future results or future earnings. I'm so grateful that my past performance is not a guarantee of my future outcomes. I am provided for. Jesus is my way. So no matter how much I've been stumbling, clueless, and blind up to this point, he's a way forward for me through every circumstance of life. No matter how difficult my tomorrow is, how many unforeseen obstacles might arise, Jesus goes before me so that I'm never caught out. When I arrive in a place, in a situation, in any circumstances, with any difficult decision, with any needs to find a solution to the problem, the one who loves me, the one who's committed, that we've been celebrating through these last few days of Christmas, is Emmanuel, God with us. He got there first. And so in every day, with every new morning, I have a provision that is mine, because Jesus has established that it should be. You know, that member of staff in the school where I was at the time. They looked at my attitude, my aptitude, my behavior, my mindset, whatever it was that caused them to have such an opinion of my future. But because Jesus is my life, and Jesus is my provider, and Jesus goes in front of me so that I never arrive somewhere without him having been able to make preparation for me to live in that circumstance. He's made the judgment, the judges of the earth, useless. You know, I don't know the things that you're facing in the year that lie ahead. I don't even know the things that I'm facing. But I can tell you this, that your future prospects don't have to be defined by your ability to forge a way through unseen circumstances and troubling times. Because when Jesus promised that he was the way, he didn't promise it in isolation of your practical life. He promised it in full knowledge that your route back to the Father, your Creator, was a journey of pilgrimage through the circumstances of this life, through the seasons of your journey. In 2021, any human judgment of my prospect is irrelevant. He makes the judges of the earth useless because he's my provider. You know, the last thing that got me really excited, and especially in the light of all the division, all of the aggressive grandstanding of people's positions that we see in our society today, is that Jesus has released me and released you from the need to assess or to judge others. You know, in human thinking, when we see somebody behave a particular way or we hear them express an opinion, our natural response is a defensive one. Our natural response is one to position ourselves accordingly. And so we're always watching to try and figure out people's intentions, people's motivations, to say, well, what are they planning to do? How are they planning to act? Do I need to guard myself? Do I need to prepare myself? Do I need to keep them at arm's length? He makes the judges of the earth useless. You know, over the years, I've been blessed to know some extraordinary people. But some of those extraordinary people that I've known have caused others around me to have absolute panic attacks. I remember some years ago when we were doing a lot more schools work than we're doing at the moment. Well, certainly at the moment we're locked up. We haven't been out of the house for 9 months. But when we were doing a lot of schools work, a couple of teenage lads who they're now in probably their early 30s, which is just makes me feel very old. But a couple of teenage lads who had a bit of a reputation in the community popped in a couple of times just to have supper with us. Came and had some pizza, sat on the sofa and played silly games on the PlayStation. And somebody who really loves us, really cares for us, one evening they saw these two lads knocking on the door and coming into the old house 193. They were horrified. They were horrified. So horrified, in fact, they parked their car up and watched until the two lads left. And then they came and knocked on the door and decided to tell me how much danger Liz and I had been in because we'd invited these two youngsters into our home. We weren't in danger. They were a pair of great kids. Sure, they had their issues and they had their baggage, but we weren't in danger, not because we were somehow unaware of their issues or their reputation. We weren't in danger because either we believe that God is for us, so who can be against us, or we don't. Either Jesus is my shield and my defense and my rock, or he isn't. Either God is able to be my protector, my ever-present help in time of trouble, or he's not. You know, I'm not suggesting that you are unwise about your relationships. And now I'm certainly not suggesting that you ignore when by the Holy Spirit God prompts you and says, you know, maybe back away from this one. My point is that Jesus releases me from the need to make my own assessment. You see, sometimes the most deadly people in my life have arrived dressed beautifully. They've been well-mannered and wonderfully spoken, and yet they have brought with them chaos. And some of the most precious people in my life have shown up armed to the teeth and not very sober. See, God transforms our relationships. They can be relationships without fear and without judgment. So I go into 2021, I'm absolutely sure I will encounter all sorts of people, maybe not in person, but I will encounter them online. I'll have conversations with them. I'm hoping, God willing, before the year is out, I'll be able to see some people face to face again. But whoever I encounter, whoever I end up engaged with, whatever conversations there might be, whoever God brings me into relationship with, I don't have to check them out. I don't have to take a guarded position, because Jesus has made the judges of the earth, even my judgment, useless. You see, I might say, well, this one doesn't seem to be great. You can imagine an assessment made in those first few chapters after we're introduced to the murderous, church-hating, elitist Saul, the young man who, to please his lecturers, holds the coats of those that stone the martyr Stephen to death. And yet it is God's purpose that his life should be transformed and he might become Paul the Apostle. I know in 2021, I want God to so touch my heart and my mind that when I encounter people, my only expectation is defined by what he shows me by his Spirit, and that I do it with an open arms and open heart, that I respond to those that I disagree with and those whose opinions I find troubling with great grace and great compassion, because my confidence is that God is for me and that God is able to make a declaration about somebody else that my mind simply could not grasp. One of the things I initially found really strange and uncomfortable about doing these live streams is I'm fundamentally sat here in a room on my own. I have no idea if there's anybody paying any attention or if there's someone on the other side of the camera, and I don't know who it is. But tonight, as I sit here, I'm confident that people are who God says they are, not who I might imagine them to be. And so actually there's a great freedom here, because I don't know who's listening and I don't know who might watch it later or who might engage with it at some other point in time. But I'm certain that if you're still breathing, God has a purpose for your future. That if you're still in what the old King James referred to as the land of the living, then whatever anybody says about you, and no matter what your past might have been, no matter how dangerous or toxic or difficult, no matter how wonderful or flawlessly people might see you living out your life, at the heart of it all, your need is the same and your potential is the same. Your need is Jesus and your potential is unlimited, because it is only defined by what God is able to do for you, with you, through you, and in you. So, at the end of 2020, a year in which our politics has become polarized, in which the responses to the virus have caused people to just lose their mind in so many different ways, whether they think there's nothing to be frightened of or they think there's everything to be frightened of. People have behaved in so many irrational ways. It has been a source of argument and division and facing the uncertainties of 2021. I'm so grateful that mercy has triumphed over judgment. Not just the judgment that happens in courts, but the judgment that happens in homes, and the judgment that happens in friendships, and the judgment that happens in communities, and the judgment that happens when we turn the press on and the media want us to turn somebody into other, different from us, not entitled to what we're entitled to. The judgment that happens when we stare in the mirror and we look ourselves in the eye. In 2021, the mercy of God will continue to triumph over all human judgment, over all human opinions. And God is able to exceed all of our expectations, to release us from the consequences of what we might have done or been, to give us prospects which find their hope and their joy in His provision, and to be our protector and our shield and our defense. So that instead of us having to make an assessment of, well, should I hang with this one? Is that person someone that we can, with open arms, walk through life, trusting that God can guide us, can be the center of those relationships. And that in 2021, the burden of judgment is lifted, not just the judgment that might be against us, but the burden that being our own judges will have brought to us. Mercy has triumphed over judgment. Jesus has made the judges of the world, of the systems of the world, of the neighborhoods, the families, the communities, the workplaces of the world, powerless, useless, and utterly unnecessary. God bless. Next time we speak on a live stream, it's going to be 2021. And we might have some thoughts about what the new year is like. But however you spend the next few days, I just pray that you don't spend them in fear, that you don't spend them being thrown around in your thinking, but that the God of peace just gives you a calm assurance that He goes before you, that if you belong to Jesus, whatever circumstances might come about in 2021, if God is for you, none of those circumstances can overwhelm or defeat or define you. God bless. We'll talk next week.